Thank you very much. Ah, lovely to be here. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a tiny bit of context about me first, because otherwise this is going to sound like a really, really weird talk. So I work in security awareness and security culture. They are not the same thing. Awareness sits underneath culture. And what I will be doing is I'm going to be talking about phishing simulations and why they are terrible and what we can do instead, but mostly why they're terrible. And then I'm going to move on to talk about knitting. And I even have brought some knitting with me. So at that point, I will be knitting whilst talking about knitting because, multitasking. And I thought it was a good idea when I put it in the abstract when I applied. Thanks, everyone. So first of all, the little bit of context around phishing simulations. Big problem for me as someone that comes from a wealth of experience in behavior change and training and educating people and creating, really effective knowledge is that phishing simulations do all of the wrong stuff if you want people to learn and be better and actually change their behaviors. So when you're designing awareness training, you want to be changing people's behavior. And there are three really key things to think about when you want to change behavior. First one is make the behavior really, really easy. Second thing is reward the behavior. Positive reinforcement has been shown over huge numbers of studies to be way more effective than negative reinforcement, particularly for long-term change. And the final thing is repeat. So the only thing that phishing sims do here is hit the repeat bit. And they don't really make the behavior clear. They don't give you positive reinforcement or reward. All they do is repeat. Positive reinforcement, way better than negative reinforcement. And positive reinforcement, the quicker that you can apply it, the more effective it is. So it's instantaneous. So if anyone has ever had a dog or any other animal, you reward their good behavior as soon as you tell them to sit. They sit, you give them the treat, that kind of thing. People, I know people don't like it. People are basically animals as well. Same behavior tricks work with them. So when we're looking at the real negatives of phishing simulations, there's a few things to focus on. The first one is the metrics. The metrics of phishing simulations are click rate metrics. And I don't know if anyone here has ever worked in marketing or branding or sales, but click rate metrics are marketing metrics. Because you send a lovely email with, say, a discount, how many people open your email, how many people click through that email to your website, have you got a low bounce rate of people staying there, is that leading into sales? And you can directly track sales numbers through to marketing campaigns and efforts, especially email-based ones. We're not selling anything with a phishing email. All a click rate tells us is how effective you were at writing a clickbaity title, how convincing you were at, selling a concept to somebody. I'm sure everyone's been dragged into various online blog things full of adverts that had a really good title. And the reason why there's tons of adverts is because they're really good at that click rate metric. So it's worth them spending money to put adverts on the page. That's why those pages have so many adverts. That doesn't really help us at all from a security standpoint. It just gives us a really easy number that already exists in a different industry. Useless for either knowing if people understand what phishing is, if they know what they should be doing, doesn't tell us anything except for the person writing the phishing simulation could have a really good job in marketing. And not only that, but click rate metrics are generally hooked into, in a lot of cases, those very aggressive pop-ups that tell you that you failed the simulation and drag people into mandatory relearning training. So they're kind of negatively reinforcing themselves. So all of the joy of a good click rate is entirely destroyed. We're not actually measuring what we want to measure. And this is where we come back to the behavioral side of how to actually train people to be more secure and to be better. Because the number one thing we have to remember is our end users, our general staff, are not security people. They either don't care about security, they have no idea about security, or they don't want to know about security, or all three. And they're entirely okay to think like that. They don't have to, they're not the security team. What we need to do is ask people or work out how we can ask people to care about security. We cannot do that by yelling at them with the phishing simulations, negatively reinforcing the fact that they've done something bad, that they don't really know what it is, and then forcing them into more mandatory training that hasn't worked already. Now, diving into the whole clicking things, again, Clicking in emails. 30 years ago, people didn't really send links in emails, wasn't really a thing. So yeah, don't click on stuff. Great message. However, nowadays, a lot of best practice in various places, particularly where I am in the UK, is to share links to documents in emails as opposed to sending them as attachments, because you can control who has access to them and you've got more control over version control and everything. So we are simultaneously telling people to send stuff as links in emails and asking people in their daily lives to every day open emails and click on links, while simultaneously telling them not to click links in emails with our phishing simulations. There's a bit of cognitive dissonance coming along here. We've made that clear and easy behavior that I mentioned earlier. It's not clear, it's not easy. You've just confused people. They don't really know what they should be doing. Should they be doing the policy that says send everything as links and use links to open documents? Or should they do the don't open any links at all because it could be a phish? It just doesn't work. And the reason for this, that I think, is the vast majority of people who are running phishing simulations either don't have dedicated awareness professionals, and even if they do, it's something that you've always done, is send phishing emails. It's simulation after simulation, and if people aren't falling for your simulation, make it harder so you're going to trap them and get them. And it's like, why are we doing that? How is that helping people learn to be more secure? You're just making them feel worse about themselves. Because remember, a phishing attack is an attack, just like someone being mugged is an attack. They are the victim here. Why are we trying to victimize our staff? It doesn't help them. If you've ever been a victim of anything of any type, you know how uncomfortable it is and how awful you feel. And you're going to do anything possible to avoid that feeling ever again. And when we're already confused about, do we do links, do we not do links, what are we doing? The likelihood is, and there's lots of evidence for this and anecdotal evidence over all sorts of the internet, Reddit, personal stories from people I personally know and friends, etc., that they're just going to stop opening any email at all. And there are stories of people doing this sort of very aggressively, shortly after very aggressive phishing simulations. A lot of those are ones that offer, monetary bonuses or discounts on things or rewards as a method to trap and trick people. There was a situation with one of the British rail companies a couple of years ago where they offered a monetary bonus to everybody as a phishing simulation, and the backlash was so bad that a lot of the work stopped, and they ended up having to give everybody that bonus money because everyone was so outraged. And this leads into a little bit about the fact that phishing simulations really undermine people's trust, not only in the security team, but the wider organization. They're not going to trust you. They're not going to trust any of the helpful emails that you're going to send them in the future, of the positive things, how to help them with other things or little heads up. They're going to trust nobody. They're going to be really disgruntled. They're going to be potentially looking for a new job. People feel personally attacked and they do not like it. And there is no real behavioral reason to be doing this. The behavior that we want isn't necessarily people not clicking things. We want them to not fall for phishes. And those are necessarily two different things. Not all phishing attacks are click-based. Not all are malware-based. A huge majority are after finances, are after personal identifying information, are after sensitive data, are after credentials, all of that kind of stuff. And a fun little anecdote, a friend of mine used to work for a law firm, does not work there anymore, and they sent out at the end of every month policies that have been updated across the law firm so that everyone was up to date on the latest policies. And their security team thought it would be a great idea to use one of those policy emails as a phishing simulation. Terrible idea. Everyone was very upset about it. They had a huge number of click rates because they'd been trained to trust that those emails were going to give them proper updates. Very disappointing. My friend in particular, she reads all of those policy updates. As soon as this phishing simulation happened, she felt absolutely terrible and awful and had sort of a minor crisis about it, and then never opened any of those policy emails ever again. And obviously that undermines then the fact that she doesn't know if there's any HR updates, anything. She wasn't reading any of it because she was afraid it was going to be another simulation. So what is the behavior that we actually want? What is it that we want people to do? Going back, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the security awareness people in roles in organizations aren't necessarily from a behavior and education background. A lot of it isn't even a full-time role in many organizations. That's changing over the last few years, so that's good. A lot of people are security people, technical people who've moved out of being on that technical side to go to more soft sciences kind of thing, and inverted commas soft. It's not, there's lots of science here. And they don't really know what they're trying to train, and they don't really know how to educate people because that's not their background, but they're really good at security. And the problem with educating is you have to be really good at educating people and understanding and pinpointing specific behaviors. So when it comes to phishing, there are two things that we want people to do. We want people to understand how phishes work, and we want people to report anything they think is a phish. That's all we want them to do. Doesn't matter about telling them about clicking stuff, because as I said before, that's just a small part of phishes. If we teach people what a phish is, how it works, which is it gives you a sense of urgency, the vast majority, and the vast majority will give you a heightened emotional state, positive or negative, and that both of those things impact your ability to critically think, and when combined, seriously hamper your ability to critically think. And we want them to step back, take 5 minutes anytime that they identify that those feelings are happening. When something comes with urgency and a heightened emotional state, they should have, with enough practice, going, oh, this raises flags, let me take 5 minutes, what can I do? First step, they can report it. Second step, they can do an out-of-band check, independently verify if it's real or not. But the very one thing we want them to do is report anything that seems suspicious. Then, harking back to that lovely positive reinforcement, as soon as they hit that report phishing button, they get a really nice, fantastic job. We really appreciate it. You're helping us make a better, more secure organization, that kind of vibes. And then we have analysts on the other end who are going to be able to look at, analyze, and give them feedback. Yes, it's a phish. No, it's not a phish. Please feel free to do the action. And at that point, the feedback comes immediately. So the more immediate to the behavior, the positive reinforcement and reward comes, the more likely it is to cement that behavior in the future. And the more useful and polite and helpful and friendly that response can be once it's been analyzed, yes or no, is super helpful. We can then go even deeper there, and we've got metrics. So we can start identifying, of those phishes that were identified, how many people reported that phish before it got pulled from everyone's mailboxes? Who is the best in our organization at identifying and reporting phishes? Some analyst areas will identify high value reporters, and will anything that is reported by them, they'll put them to the top of their list to analyze because it's, likely to be a phish. And we can use that as security awareness people to say, these people are doing a great job. They probably don't need more training. They can just pass the refresher course. And then you can go all the way down to the bottom at people who aren't really reporting very much, or people who are reporting a lot, but they're not reporting phishes. And we can either identify that they are just not spotting the phishes and they need a bit more training on how phishes work, what they are, how they put together, or also, are they reporting stuff that actually genuinely does look like a phish? And actually, it's the people they're working with, whether that's internal colleagues or suppliers and vendors, who are writing emails that are triggering those phishing vibes, in which case we need to help re-educate them on how to write emails better. So we can then get our metrics that we are wanting from phishing, which is tracking that behavior change of, are people reporting phishes? So in my world, where I am, I don't do phishing simulations. I know, I hate them. I think they're very pointless. From many of the reasons I've just said here. And awareness, security awareness is sort of a decade behind all other educational areas. And phishing simulations are purely negative reinforcement based, and nobody anywhere is likely to react well to a simulation. And the problem with it is, whilst it's undermining the security team and it's undermining the security of the organization, and people are losing trust in you and your teams, the problem you have additionally is, if people feel shame and sadness and regret and worry and stress about something like a phishing simulation and being yelled at for falling for it when we should be supporting them, they're much less likely to want to actually report an incident when they fall for a real phish. So if they realize that they've accidentally given their credentials up to a real phish, they're much less likely to tell their security team that that's happened, because they are in their head thinking they're going to be yelled at. And that's where it loops into that sort of more overarching security culture concept. So these tiny things of phishing simulations can negatively impact people's ability to want to report not only phishing incidents, but other incidents as well, because in their head, the security team are yelly people and they have big sticks and they come and hit you. And if something bad happens, they're not going to support you. They're just going to make you do more training. And most of the training is not my training, which means it's really terrible. And I say that from people that come to my training and then immediately afterwards ask what other training they can come to that I'm running. And my phishing training is one of those ones that people want to come and do more of. They book all of their other staff onto them. So it's not just me being big-headed. My phishing training works really, really well. And I gather other metrics around it as well, but that's an entirely different talk. But yes, so the undermine of the reporting desire is really problematic. Like I said, I don't run phishing simulations because I do training, and the training is, what is a fish? How does a fish work? Make me a fish. And people love that, and it's really engaging, and it really helps cement in their brains how fishes work, and that phishing is more than, you know, just a badly written email. But I'm fully aware that lots of places require phishing simulations due to insurance purposes or compliance in certain sectors. And there is a way of doing phishing simulations that isn't evil and is useful for people. And that is making them the most brutally obvious, blatant phishing simulation possible. Anything short of, I am a fish, please report me, because then you're prompting the action, and we want to try and avoid that unless your phishing simulations are not getting reported at all, in which case prompt people, because if we are going to be training behavior, BJ Fogg, if anyone wants to read up on his stuff, he's got lots of pop sci books that brings the behavioral science to sort of more general people who isn't their specialty, has this wonderful concept of, you know, you need to motivate people and you need to have it's called his BMAP thing, behavior is motivation, and the activity and or the ability and the prompt. So if you're struggling with all of it, then a prompt is doable. But making it such a brutally, blatantly obvious fish that people have no other option than going, oh, I know what that is, that's a fish. Oh, and that behavior that I'm supposed to do from the training is I should report this. And then they get the wonderful feedback of, well done, you've done really good reporting. And you can bang that out into, so, you know, this directorate's reported way more than others. Good job, you get, you know, a chocolate. But you can then measure instead of measuring the click rates, you're measuring the report rates. So if you've sent 100 phishing simulations out that scream I'm a fish and only 10 of them have been reported, you need to redo that training to get people to understand that you should report something that looks suspiciously like a fish. And by the way, this is what a fish is and how it works. If you're getting 90% of those reported as fish, you've done a great job. Everyone's doing great. They are doing the behavior you want. Because the behavior you want is if someone sees something suspicious, they report it. We don't really care about the click rate, because all that says is the people in the security team are great at writing marketing emails. Don't tell them I said that. Tell them I said that. Fight me. I'm fine with it. I will die on this hill. I frequently do. So yeah, phishing simulations are one of those things that have just been done for so long that everyone just kind of goes with it as the status quo, and one of those areas where, oh, really easy metrics. But when you look at it from the actual behavioral point, are they metrics that are useful to us? No. Are they giving us the behaviors we want? No. Are they damaging the security culture? Yes. Is there something better we can do? Yes. Is it making people feel like they are a part of the organization and a part of that front line of defense, which they are? People are really powerful when you have them on side, and when you teach them how and why to do stuff, people tend to want to do it. So yes, that is the joyful part of the Sims part of this Knitting Sims talk. I realize I've rambled and got a bit overexcited there. It is a thing I feel passionately about. Happy to answer questions forever on this. And I will move on to Knitting Sims, well, the knitting part of the Knitting Sims. And I have a marvelous top-down camera setup because I felt organized when I put the abstract in, like I said, you know, cameras. I was supposed to be knitting this lovely blanket that's behind me, but I finished it 2 weeks ago. And that was a really lovely, easy blanket to knit, and it looks really impressive. And I knitted that for myself. And it took since the 8th of January. That was a very, very long knit. Which leads me nicely into designing knitting for yourself versus other people. The number one thing is, are they going to appreciate it and use it, or are you just knitting it because you want to feel special? Normally, I ask people if they would like something to be knitted before I knit it for them, because there's nothing worse than putting hours and hours and days of your life, and I kid you not, it is hours. Like I said, I was knitting that at least like 2-3 hours a day since the 8th of January. It takes a long time to knit stuff. Are they going to use it? Are they going to wear it? Are they going to appreciate it? I have a big rule that anyone that gets a knitted gift that never uses it never gets another knitted gift, because I don't have time in my life for that, and other people appreciate things more. So this that I'm knitting right now is going to be a tiny baby cardigan, because a friend of mine is having babies, and it's like a nice textured dot stitch. It will look like this when it's finished. This is a random baby on the pattern, but it's a cute little knit stitch. It's called a dot stitch. It's a mixture of, well, it's a fake version of the moth stitch. It's a little bit less time intensive to do. And when you're designing stuff or knitting stuff, even if you're just taking someone else's pattern, you've got to think of a few different things. One of those things is, who is it for? This is for a baby. Babies make a lot of baby fluids that are a bit disgusting, so it needs to be easy to wash, which severely limits the yarn choices. So natural fibers, 100% natural fibers, generally you can only hand wash, and nobody really wants to hand wash a cardigan covered in baby fluids by hand in a sink in a bowl. They want to chuck it in the washing machine. So you have to pick a yarn that can be machine washed. And there are huge numbers of baby yarns these days that are done with a mix of acrylic, so synthetic fibers, and natural fibers. So this is a lovely cashmere, merino cashmere, but the large percentage of it is acrylic. So this lovely cashmere is super soft and fluffy. It's delicious. This can actually go in the washing machine at 30 on a delicate cycle, and then it'll dry relatively quickly if you lay it out flat. So this is really low stress for the new parents, because anyone who has been a new parent will know very little time and energy. However, I have made baby booties, and I will always make those out of 100% natural wool, because baby booties don't tend to get covered in too much disgustingness. They're just there to keep their little tootsies warm. So they're usually smaller than your hand, so chucking them in the sink to hand wash takes all of 5 seconds to go squish, 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 and then you're done. And they look cute. And oftentimes people just, put them on for pictures and then take them off. So that's when you're sort of knitting for babies. Acrylic's also slightly safer as a bet, really, because of that machine wash. If you don't want to splurge on the money for a mixed cashmere and acrylic thing, a lot of acrylic wool these days is super duper soft and lovely, and you genuinely would not know. When knitting for myself, I'm happy to spend a little bit more money generally on the yarn. There's nothing worse than spending a lot of money on yarn for somebody and they absolutely hate it, and then it goes in a drawer and they never use it again. Because if I make it for myself and I absolutely hate it, I can frog it, which is when you undo it and you just rip all the wool out back to a ball, and then you can knit it for something else, and that's absolutely fine and really enjoyable to do. I'm going to finish this row, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about designing specific patterns for people. So a friend of mine, last year, I offered to make their kids some scarves for Christmas. What did they have any characters that they liked? And they said Minecraft. So I thought, oh, brilliant. Tell me what their favorite things are, and I will design some scarves for them. There are pictures in the Slack channel, if anyone saw those, of like random, very cartoonish things. That was me designing stuff. I have this lovely squared paper notebook, and this is a really bad drawing of my knitting pattern that I did for the very first time of the chart. So knitting, generally the patterns are written out and they look quite like code, I have been told. I will give you a little sneak peek of the baby one. So they look a little bit like this. And that's all well and good. But when you're doing color work, which is what I love to do, and because I'm a relatively intermediate experienced knitter, I'm happy to do complicated stuff like this blanket with lots of different colors, and intarsia color work, which is big blocks of colors, as well as stranded color work, whereas lots of people who knit a little bit can't do that and they don't feel comfortable doing that. So I'm very happy to donate my time and effort and resources to give them something I know they'll love that they wouldn't be able to make themselves. So this is the chart for the colors. I will zoom it up to you a little bit and you'll see that it's made of little tiny letters, and that's just the colors for all the various wools. This one didn't work out, and I knew it wasn't going to work out, and I was very, very forward thinking, and I had already designed a backup dog head. So this is the front of the dog head. It's a wolf but it has a collar on it. And whilst it's kind of difficult to see, each of these squares on the square paper works out as like one knit stitch. And then each of these is a different letter. So you've got like DG for dark gray, W for white, B for black, all of that. So it's all designed there in a chart. And you'll notice that there's lots of writing around this if we go back to the actual pattern. And this is the pattern for the rest of the scarf that goes around the wolf. So I had to work out roughly how wide I wanted the scarves, how long I wanted the scarves, and what I wanted the edging to be so it wouldn't curl up so much. So I put some rib stitching, some garter stitch on the outside as a like flamboyant border. And I had a good chunk of rib at the bottom as well. And then this is telling me about which rows I'm doing, how many rows I'm doing, so that when I make all 3 scarves, they all kind of match, but they're just different colors with different pictures. I also decided to do a different one at each side. So there's a front wolf, and then hopefully you can see this is zoomed out enough. This is a side-on wolf, and you'll be able to see again the pictures in the Slack channel. Again, you'll see there's got little numbers down here, and this is because as I was knitting it, this was the first row all the way up to the 14th row so that I knew where I was, because these little bad boys are the greatest things ever invented. These are the click counters for counting stuff, and I use them for counting rows. And they are amazing and incredible because you can switch it off and you don't have to think. You just finish a row, click, finish a row, click, and it's really satisfying, click. So whenever you're knitting a normal pattern, they usually have the row numbers listed out. Super helpful. So this is my end man. And as you can see, I ran out of space at the bottom, but it was just the legs, so that was fine. And you can also see here how I've made mistakes. And this is why I really love drawing them out first, because making mistakes on paper and scribbling it out and changing it and adding things like which direction to decrease stitches and where to add stitches in the row counts is way easier than just knitting it and hoping for the best. So this is kind of my lovely in-hand joke of knitting simulations, simulated knitting. And I'm lazy here and I didn't just want to write black all the way across, so I saved my pen. You'll see the Enderman scarf is my favorite. I think it turned out really well. This Elder Guardian was an absolute beast to do. I didn't know what it was when I agreed to do it. I regretted it slightly, but it came out looking really nice. And again, the white in the middle is just me saving ink. And again, too much space, and you can see that I've got all of these charting things written out. And these take ages to do because you have to look at the image that you're planning on replicating. And here's the front of him. He looks delightful with his little eyeball in the middle. And here's the tail, because I ran out of space. So you can see it's significantly clearer here. Charting out like this takes a lot of time. And there are lots of ripped out pages where I just entirely scribbled out all the way. And it's really good fun for the color work because you can work out roughly how much you need for each individual yarn. And you know, I mentioned for the baby stuff, you've got to think about what yarns you're doing. So these are for kids, but these are for slightly older kids who aren't really going to appreciate nice, soft, fluffy wool. And also, you'll notice here that the texture works really well, but it's not massively well defined. So the texture is visible because what we've got is a purl stitch, the bumpy stitch, lying in with the little leg stitches, the stockinette, the V's, the knit stitches. And it looks really good. But when you're working with wool, often you'll see that the definition doesn't work so great. So this is a shawl that I'm working on that I'm not knitting live because there's lots of increases. But you can see that the colors blend and you can't really see the individual stitches. And you'll notice that this is very similar to the blanket. It's just a shawl version. So the colors all blend into one and they're not really massively clear. So knitting really complicated multicolored color work with stuff like that doesn't really work. So we have to think about what wool is going to work well for color work. What can I do that's going to make each of these individual colors really shine? Cotton. Controversial. Not a lot of knitters like knitting in cotton because generally it's considered to be quite annoying to knit with. It's very inflexible. This wool here you'll see is quite stretchy if I pull it. Cotton is not. You have to be really good at your tension when you're knitting with cotton. So a lot of crocheters love to learn to crochet with cotton because it's very stable. So it's handy for crochet. Knitting's really difficult to learn to knit with cotton because it's so stable that it doesn't forgive you at all if you make any mistakes with your tension. And your tension is how even all of your stitches are. I've always had really good tension. I really like knitting with cotton because I have never had any problems with tension. So you'll find that those scarves that are knitted out are very bright because cotton takes dye really, really well. So it's really clear with all of the different colors. So I've got single stitches of color within that color work in some of them, especially the Elder Guardian, where it's really noticeable and you can see it. In addition to that, that's just a bit of fun. I also redesigned a pre-made pattern that I bought for some honeycomb gloves, and you'll be able to see the hat and the glove combo. I think I also popped in Slack as the channels there, made with a lovely acrylic wool. It's like an acrylic mix, but it needs hand washing, unfortunately. But I didn't like how short the mittens were. So I did this really bad drawing. Any of you who can see the pictures in Slack of the mittens will see how bad this drawing is, because this is kind of what the hexagons look like. And my terrible drawing was this. I wanted to extend the wrist. So in the original pattern, the cuff finished here. And that's way too short. I'm not feeling it. And the person I was making it for, I know that they like a longer mitt glove. So I planned to extend it down to about here on the arm. So in order to do that without making it look weird, I had to redesign a cable pattern. I love doing cables. You get these cool things here called cable needles, little V's all by themselves. And what you do is you move some stitches onto this, and then you either put them behind or in front of your work, and then you knit around them, and then you knit off of your cable needle, and it gives you those tracks. So if you look at that honeycomb, it's sort of like a greeny yellow. You'll see the little honeycomb cables are on there. So I had to repeat the pattern, but only the very end piece, the single hexagon at the bottom. And you'll see here in all these notes that I was writing down, it took me about 20 minutes to work out how to repeat it. And then as I was repeating it, I made a note saying, write it out future in the notebook, because above it said, it's a bit tricky. And you can see on the following page, I did not write it out, which means if I ever have to knit that again, I'm going to have to sit there and work it out again because I didn't write out the pattern. So I'm very good at drawing out my charted colorways in this, very bad at my notes on my patterns. This baby cardigan here, this lovely knit one, they also wanted a giraffe and initials sweater, but I'm not making that till they're 1 because babies grow too fast, and a fully colorwork stranded jumper for a tiny human that they're going to outgrow, I was like, I will do it for their first birthday. So this is all I've designed so far. As you can see, my terrible drawing, it's got tiny giraffes on it. I haven't charted those yet because I've been mildly terrified that I don't know how big the baby's going to be. So when you're charting color work, it's really important to know how big your canvas is. So I have been looking at a lot of top-down color work yoke sweaters, which is the bits around sort of the neckline. You'll see there's absolutely tons of images for them all around. And I'm working on a few of those with different designs in different sizes to help me really get to grips with redesigning the same color work, but for different sizes. It's really difficult to do. And that's something that I will probably redo and do in the same sort of wool. And this is why you'll find that lots of knitters have stuff like this, gigantic balls of wool. This is just a 20% wool, 80% acrylic tweed type thing. So it's got a bit of texture, and left in it's an Aran, which is a slightly chunkier weight of wool for knitting. And then acrylic's really good for frogging back because it doesn't really hold shape so much, whereas wool really does. And this is a fun point to talk about designing for wool. So often people buy, well, my friends do, they'll buy a particular wool and they'll ask me to make something. And I really ask them not to do that because it's really, really stressful. So wool comes in different weights. This that I'm knitting with right here is a lovely double knit. And this is fairly simple to knit with. That grey I just showed you is an Aran, which is the next size up. And this bad boy here, this is fingering weight. So you can see how very thin, and I've kept it on the red because the red is really bright. You can see the difference between the red and the blue. Yeah. This one is very thick. This is very thin. Knitting black finger weights, terrible idea. Don't do it. Your eyes will not thank you. So when you're designing stuff, for myself, that is for me, which is why I'm happy to strain my eyes for myself. I can't complain at a friend for having asked me to, make them socks in black fingering weight wool. But the chunkier the wool, the quicker things knit up. the smaller the wool, the thinner the wool, the longer it takes and the harder it is to work with. But often the really thin wools give you absolutely stunning and beautiful designs. So that is the end of that rather meandering, sorry, thinking and talking whilst knitting, significantly harder than anticipated. I will continue knitting and hand over to Leslie to ask if there are any questions that people would like to ask me on
Yes,
anything.
we have a few queued up. First of all, some folks were asking for the patterns, such as the baby sweater pattern and the blanket pattern.
Okay, the blanket is West Knits, Stephen West, and it's his honeycomb pattern. So this is the honeycomb blanket. He also does a painting bricks where it's brick shaped rather than honeycomb. So you can buy them individually or as part of a set where there's lots of different honeycomb patterns. And the cardigan is the Serdar pattern number 5241. I will write it down in the chat afterwards, and it's cute and it looks cute in whatever color you make it in, I think, and it has little buttons and it's delightful. I love doing cardigans.
Thank you so much. There's a question on the fishing section of your talk. Any advice for non-work fishing training? I have to train my retired dad to stop falling for scams. How do I do this?
It sucks, right? The really sad thing is that retired people are a demographic that are more heavily targeted. And I would go with the same vibes that I use for teaching people in work, which is understand what a fish is and what they're after. So if you tell people what a fish is somebody pretending to be somebody else and trying to get something from you. So they will likely want money, information, or passwords, generally when you're being targeted as sort of a non-work situation. And that they will give you an urgent thing and it will heighten your emotional state. And that will be good or bad. You've won the lottery, you've won football tickets. Also, fishing's perfectly valid, as well as you've missed the tax return deadline, you'll be fined £1,000, or get out of jury service by paying us £60, $60, etc. And that if you sit with them and help kind of create what could be a really good fish that he might be aware of, what information is available about here? Your parents online, do they really like football? Do they have local football teams that they support a lot on social media? Things like that. Could somebody use that to maybe scam them with a football tickets sort of scam, or hotel discounts and things like that? And if you help them to kind of come up with a fish themselves that might work against them, they're much more likely to want to or be able to see what a fish is and to really push the out of band checks. So if they're getting an email that says, we'll go the football ticket scenario because we've already started it, to contact the actual football team themselves and see if they ran that promotion, find their official website, give them a call. Old people love calling. I say old people, I'm also old. Retired people tend to love phone calling people. Young people tend to prefer emails. So if you do that, you've got that out of band check, you can put an extra step in and just say, just verify it before you do anything. Anything that seems too really urgent, you've got to make a decision really quickly and it's promising you something really good or really scary, just put that extra step in and really support them. Try not to make them super scared about it, but really tell them every time they do it, even if you're the person that they contact and say, I had this email, tell them what a good job they did and how really amazing they are. You'd be surprised how little bits of positive reinforcement like that are really effective at getting that behavior change in with people.